Hi, my name is Brennan Lafaro. I am a contributor to DeadHeadReviews and co-host with Patrick R. McDonough of Dead Headspace podcast. And in honor of Pride Month, I'm going to be doing a short reading from one of my absolute favorite authors. That's Hailey Piper, and I'm going to be reading from An Invitation to Darkness. The shoreline closed in on the road from either side the farther I walked until I reached the manor itself. Its stone walls ran slick with sea spray, each block larger than my entire body. It must have taken years to construct. Its doors stood less palatial, two red-brown planks of weathered wood that long ago needed to be replaced. They wouldn't budge when I tried to open them, and I thought they were locked before noticing the nails hammered into the wood. They fused the doors together in a grisly iron grin. "You cannot enter that way." I turned, startled by the voice of a song. She caught me off guard, this young woman in her black skirts, her white walking jacket, the black locks of her hair flowing past her neck around a face as lovely as it looked broken-hearted. "Me?" "I didn't mean to frighten you," she said. Then, in her eyes, that she had seen too many funerals and watched the stars die, or so it seemed to me, there was the slightest glint of bemusement. What woman alive could ignore a paradox that curious? I explained that I was fine, only perplexed by the doors and their nails, and asked for her forgiveness. She gave more than forgiveness. She invited me to tea. "But we'll have to go around the back." She led me, in her skirts and sadness, closer to the sandbar and along the colossal breadth of her home. The back of the manor broke apart into many sections and balconies, and each faced the sea. Up a few small steps, there was a narrow, inconspicuous door into the manor's kitchen. Pardon my rudeness, I didn't introduce myself. Lady Elizabeth Leavenworth, daughter to Lord Reginald Leavenworth. Elizabeth lit her stove and began to boil water. I tried to stand as straight as I could. "Captain Jamie Thames." "Captain?" "Former captain. My apologies, an old habit. I blame my rank for my poor manners, such as trying to barge into a house I was told no one lived here." Elizabeth relaxed into a sigh. "I suppose we do."
What's up, everybody? My name is Bret Proctor, and I am a book reviewer slash booktuber. You can find my video reviews over on YouTube. Just search my name, Bret Proctor, and my channel will come up. But today I'm excited to participate and collaborate in a video for Pride and Horror Month that is being put on by DeadHeadReviews. So thank you to everybody over there for allowing me to help participate in this. And I'm going to be doing a book talk by an LGBTQ author, and that is Clive Barker. I'm going to be reading from his collection In the Flesh. This is one of the books of blood. It's a collection of 4 short stories or novelettes, and I'm going to be reading from the story called The Forbidden, which was actually what the movie Candyman was based off of. I'm going to read like the first paragraph or two. Like a flawless tragedy, the elegance of which structure is lost upon those suffering in it, the perfect geometry of the Spectre Street estate was visible only from the air. Walking its drear canyons, passing through its grimy corridors from one gray concrete rectangle to the next, there was little to seduce the eye or stimulate the imagination. What few saplings had been planted in the quadrangles had long since been mutilated or uprooted. The grass, though tall, resolutely refused a healthy green. No doubt the estate and its 2 companion developments had once been an architect's dream. No doubt the city planners had wept with pleasure at a design that housed 3 and 36 persons per hectare, and still boasted space for a children's playground. Doubtless fortunes and reputations had been built upon Spectre Street, and at its opening fine words had been spoken, and its being a yardstick by which all future developments would be measured. But the planners, tears wept, words spoken, had left the estate to its own devices. The architects occupied restored Georgian houses at the other end of the city and probably never set foot here. They would not have been shamed by the deterioration of the estate even if they had. Their brainchild, they would doubtless argue, was as brilliant as ever. its geometries as precise, its ratios as calculated. It was people who had spoiled Spectre Street, nor would they have been wrong in such an accusation. Helen had seldom seen an inner-city environment so comprehensively vandalized. Lamps had been shattered and backyard fences overthrown, cars whose wheels and engines had been removed and chassis then burned, blocked garbage facilities. In one courtyard, 3 or 4 ground floor maisonettes had been entirely gutted by fire, their windows and doors boarded up with planks and corrugated metal shutters. So that has been a quick reading of the story The Forbidden, which the movie Candyman has been based off of, in the collection by Clive Barker, In the Flesh, one of his books of blood. Again, my name has been Bret Proctor. Thanks for spending your time with me. Thanks to DeadHeadReviews for allowing me to participate in this book talk for Pride and Horror Month. Thanks for spending your time, and I'll talk to y'all later. Bye-bye.
All right, this is Billy Martin, written formerly as Poppy Z. Bright. These are some of my favorite quotes from the books Drawing Blood, Exquisite Corpse, and Lost Souls. Why bother? I was right all along. The second you make yourself vulnerable to someone, they start drawing blood. Maybe they did what they had to live, and tried to get a little love and have a little fun before the darkness took them. There were books about how to be gay. He'd seen them in stores and libraries. Some of them even had diagrams, but there weren't any diagrams about how to fall in love with your best friend and not fuck everything up. All at once, it hit him. This was power, too. Just as surely as smashing your fist into someone's face, just as surely as putting a hammer through someone's skull, the power to make another person crazy with pleasure, instead of fear and pain, to have every cell in another person's body at your thrall. It was like discovering that your innermost fires and terrors, the things you believed no one else could fathom, were in fact the basis of a recognized philosophy. Some part of you felt intimately invaded, threatened. Some other part fell to its knees and sobbed in gratitude that it was no longer alone.
Hey guys, happy Pride Month. I am reading a little bit of the intro from the sort of central narrative piece of the Books of Blood by Clive Barker, which if you haven't read, well, you know what Shane would say. The dead have highways. They run unerring lines of ghost trains, of dream carriages, across the wasteland behind our lives. Bearing an endless traffic of departed souls, their thrum and throb can be heard in the broken places of the world, through cracks made by acts of cruelty, violence, and depravity. Their freight, the wandering dead, can be glimpsed when the heart is close to bursting and sights that should be hidden come plainly into view. They have signposts, these highways, and bridges and laybys. They have turnpikes and intersections. It is at these intersections, where the crowds of dead mingle and cross, that this forbidden highway is most likely to spill through into our world. The traffic is heavy at the crossroads, and the voices of the dead are at their most shrill. Here, the barriers that separate one reality from the next are worn thin with the passage of innumerable feet. Like I said, if you haven't read the Books of Blood, I highly recommend it. And another real quick PSA for Pride Month. I am part of a group called Free Mom Hugs of Kentucky. We're the Kentucky chapter. And the purpose sort of being that, parental love, in case you had any question about that, is meant to be unconditional. And that is what you deserve. So sometimes the people that we're related to can't live up to that for whatever reason. So I want you to know that you are worthy of that love, no matter whether you receive it from your parents or not. And if you don't, and you need somebody to be your social media mom and be happy for you when you have things you want to celebrate, or be there for when you're sad, hit me up. You deserve it. Happy Pride.
Hi, Sadie Hartmann, Mother Horror here. I am going to read a story out of Tales from the Talking Board. It was published by Word Horror a couple years ago. I really liked the first story by Christy DeMeester, so I'm going to read a few pages from the story. It's called Yes, No, Maybe Goodbye, and it's about two young girls who are best friends who are experiencing their relationship going a little bit deeper after playing with a Ouija board, and kind of like a secret is let out during their time messing around with that Ouija board. So, okay, here we go. She blew out the candles and grabbed the bottle of wine, tipped it back, and drank until she spluttered. Her mouth was the color of blood. "Come on, let's go watch a movie or something," she said, and left the room. And I watched the place where her body used to be. The window was still dark, and I thought I saw something move against it. A hand flexed against the glass or a mouth opening, but there was nothing there, and I stood and left the board and the triangle on the floor and hurried out of the room. We watched movies for the rest of the night. Every few minutes Cassandra would take a pull off the bottle, and pretty soon she was giggling and poking me, and I would slap her hand away even if what I really wanted to do was wrap my fingers around hers and never let go. Eventually, we fell asleep on the couch. When I woke up, the house was dark, and the television was turned off. I rolled over and looked for Cassandra, but she wasn't there. I held my breath. The sound was soft at first, like the start of someone sighing before it catches in their throat. "Cass?" I called out. But nothing answered me, and I swung my legs over the couch. "It's nothing," I told myself, and forced myself to stand, my hands groping out before me, and I moved towards the hallway. "Cass?" I said again, and I could hear her then, her voice low and growling as she mumbled, and I followed the sound to her bedroom. She faced away from me. She had taken off all of her clothes. Bare-backed with her thighs and calves clenched, she stood on tiptoe and pressed her lips to the window, whispered to whatever lay beyond the glass. "It isn't a ghost, what we let out of the board. It's something else." "How many times do you think it tried to get in before we opened the door?" she said, and I could smell her then, like urine and sweat, and I brought my hand up over my mouth. She went on, "I think it was like him, like Daddy. It was always going to find a way. Didn't matter if you locked the door or not. It never fucking mattered." "What are you talking about?" I said, and she turned to me then, her eyes glittering, and stepped forward. "Come and see. There's nothing out there. It's just a window. Only if you don't know where to look." She held out her hand, and I couldn't help it. There was still that need to touch her lying underneath all of my hot, damp fear, and I let her wrap her fingers over mine and pull me beside her. "See?" she said, and pressed her face and her mouth against the glass. I closed my eyes. Cassandra pushed her hip against mine, and I remembered her skin was bare, and my entire body shuddered. "He doesn't come home when you're here with me." Behind me, something clattered, the sound of wood grating against wood, and I wondered if the board had somehow righted itself, if it had spilled out all of its dead secrets. I opened my eyes and squinted into the dark at the shape forming there. I taught myself how to disappear, how to make it so that I'm like not even here, so I won't lose myself inside of him. He always calls me his girl when he's done, but I'm not his girl," she said, and together we watched the darkness shift into something that looked like teeth. I thought about how to kill him over and over until it's almost like I've already done it. But then they'd send me away and I'd mess it up and they would know I had done it somehow. They'd send me away from you. And if you weren't there anymore, I think I'd forget how to breathe. Okay, that's all.
Hey everyone, Vee Castro here, Violet, and I am doing a short reading for Pride. Parades have been canceled everywhere, but that doesn't mean that our support and love should be canceled during this month. So let's do it by shouting out those books. So for me, I'm doing F4 by Larissa Glasser. I like this book because it's a known voices book, written by a trans woman, about trans women, and I've met Larissa. She's a wonderful person. I really I love her. She's my sister. Horror sister, I should say. So I'm going to read this, and it would be a great addition to your book. I mean, kaiju, it's crazy, it's entertaining. I read it. It's not that thick. I just could not stop reading it. So here we go. She wasn't simply a star for her looks, but devoted considerable time to smacking down the ire she drew from TERFs. Chloe was not one to be gaslit, which I love most of all. She made her enemies want to drink their own piss. I loved her, body and mind, even if she still intimidated me. I felt nervous because I didn't really know who was watching our footage on the mainland. I hoped some were potential employers. I knew my parents wouldn't be seeing it. This toothless guy named Jansen was on his knees before me, wearing full Carol Channing makeup, complete with hoop earrings and dressed like a mummy and shrouded in cling wrap. He was furiously gumming my nutsack, which had deflated from my year-old orgy. The skin was stretching with this activity. With no teeth in his mouth to block it, his saliva pooled into my ass crack and began to flood onto my anus, forming a thin membrane of humiliation for him and dysphoria for me. The camera wouldn't catch that, but it felt foreign and awkward regardless. I convinced myself if I impressed Chloe, she'd fuck my throat so hard it would gargle my attempts to praise her. I was hungry for something more for her because I'd become convinced by then that cis people are bad luck. I knew from experience. Chloe kept hissing at me to get harder and to squeal more, repeating bullet point missives from her own decade-old voice feminization instruction DVDs. I glanced up at the camera, its solid red on light eating me raw. Better than Jansen. I wasn't into cis guys anymore, but I wanted to do a good job for Chloe. I finally managed to force a grin as I remembered that I'd once been a suit and tie minion at a Manhattan auditing firm. I definitely leveled up from that. My tongue flecked my upper front teeth to clean up any stray overdone lipstick. At the far wood-paneled wall of my cabin, Chloe sat in her old school director's chair. She wore those huge Lemmy mirror aviator shades, so it was hard to tell if she was looking at me, Jansen, or she was just staring into the ether. She'd been on Adana C-grade hallucinogens since the start of the cruise, but I guess she was functional enough to direct us. She was dressed in this really cool black leather power suit with silver piping, just like the kind she once wore on stage. She knew all the new hatches in the audiences thought she looked red hot, a miracle of what plastic surgery and a little confidence could accomplish in a hostile cis world. She'd been a cottage industry out of both of her academic study and her how to pass curricula. Everyone was so desperate to blend in back then. She looked as smoking trans femme hot as ever. I finally got hard with the thought of finally being allowed to fuck her prick, even though I still had most of my teeth. Actually, I wanted to tap Jansen aside, unfasten Chloe from the bottom up, undo her tuck and spit rub our clits together until we flooded her suite with a torrent of girl cum. That would be a true cam moment, something the audience actually wanted and deserved. I've wanted her for years, but it always felt wrong for objectifying her from way back in the audience, when I hadn't even hatched yet. So that is just a little taste of the awesomeness that is F4. So speaking of pride and women that are often left in the margins, I wanted to talk a bit about something that I'm doing with Sonora Taylor, author of Without Condition. We've started something called Fright Girl Summer, hashtag Fright Girl Summer. This is basically a virtual book festival to celebrate women in horror, but especially those women that sometimes get lost or overlooked. I mean, there are so few Mexican-American females writing horror. I often feel like, where are they at? So I said, hey, why don't we do this? And Sonora jumped on, and here we go. So if you go to www.frightgirlsummer, check out how you can be involved. Guys, you can be involved as well, with readings, with book reviews. Ladies, I know how it can be discouraging sometimes. So we're here to support you, and we want to support you. So we're going to have activities for Pride all through the summer. Everything that you could want or need in a book festival, right online from the safety of your own home. So thank you for listening to F4 by Larissa Glasser. Pride is coming up. I definitely think you should pick this up. Loved it, and I absolutely love her. Thank you. Happy Pride, and stay safe.
Hi, I'm Tabby, and this is my book talk for DeadHeadReviews Pride and Horror Month. When they asked me to do this book talk, they said make it campy, make it fun. So here I am, sitting in my car, basically in disguise, keeping it campy just for you. I'm going to talk to you about Clive Barker's Cabal. He wrote this in 1988, and it was adapted into the movie Nightbreed in 1990. Now, I first found Clive Barker's books purely by accident, and I picked up the entire collection of the Books of Blood from a discount bookstore. I know, Clive Barker should never be discount. I'd been reading the usual suspects like King, Kuntz, a little bit of James Herbert, some Sean Hudson, and Barker just blew my mind, because this was horror, but this was written so poetically, so beautifully. It was just amazing. 16-year-old me absolutely loved it and went out and bought every Barker thing she could possibly find and became a little bit Barker obsessed for a while. Now, I don't have those books anymore, because when we moved from the UK to New Zealand, they got put in the wrong box and they didn't make the move. Got it! So I'm going to be reading from the ebook version that I picked up in lieu of finding the hard copies that I want to replace. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start from the beginning, because there are so many wonderful, wonderful parts that I could read that I literally couldn't choose. So I thought it'd be much easier to just start from the beginning. Of all the rash and midnight promises made in the name of love, none, Boone now knew, was more certain to be broken than "I'll never leave you." What time didn't steal from under your nose, circumstance did. It was useless to hope otherwise, useless to dream that the world somehow meant you good. Everything of value, everything you clung to for your sanity, would rot or be snatched in the long run, and the abyss would gape beneath you as it gaped for Boone now. And suddenly, without so much as a breath of explanation, you were gone to hell or worse, professions of love and all. His outlook hadn't always been so pessimistic. There'd been a time, not all that long ago, when he'd felt the burden of his mental anguish lifting. There'd been fewer psychotic episodes, fewer days when he felt like slitting his wrists rather than enduring the hours till his next medication. There'd seemed to be a chance for happiness. It was a prospect that had won the declaration of love from him, that "I'll never leave you," whispered in Laurie's ear as they lay in the narrow bed he'd never dared hope would hold too. The words had not come in the throes of high passion. Their love life, like so much else between them, was fraught with problems. But where other women had given up on him, unforgiving of his failure, she'd persevered, told him there was plenty of time to get it right, all the time in the world. "I'm with you for as long as you want me to be," her patience had seemed to say. Nobody had ever offered such a commitment, and he wanted to offer one in return. Those words, "I'll never leave you," were it. The memory of them, and of her skin almost luminous in the murk of his room, and of the sound of her breathing when she finally fell asleep beside him, all of it still had the power to catch his heart and squeeze it till it hurt. He longed to be free of both the memory and the words, now that circumstance had taken away any hope of their fulfillment. But they wouldn't be forgotten. They lingered on to torment him with his frailty. His meagre comfort was that she, knowing what she must now know about him, would be working to erase her memory, and that with time she'd succeed. He only hoped she'd understand his ignorance of himself when he'd voiced that promise. He'd never have risked this pain if he'd doubted health was finally within his grasp. Dream on. Decker had brought an abrupt end to those delusions the day he'd locked the office door, drawn the blinds on the Alberta spring sunshine, and said in a voice barely louder than a whisper, "Boone, I think we're in terrible trouble, you and I." He was trembling, Boone saw, a fact not easily concealed in a body so big. Decker had the physique of a man who sweated out the day's angst in a gym. Even his tailored suits, always charcoal, couldn't tame his bulk. It had made Boone edgy at the start of their work together. He'd felt intimidated by the doctor's physical and mental authority. Now it was the fallibility of that strength he feared. Decker was a rock. He was reason. He was calm. This anxiety ran counter to all he knew about the man. "What's wrong?" Boone asked. "Sit, will you? Sit, and I'll tell you." Boone did as he was told. In this office, Decker was lord. The doctor leaned back in the leather chair and inhaled through his nose, his mouth sealed in a downward curve. "Tell me," Boone said, "where to start. Anywhere." "I thought you were getting better," Decker said. "I really did. We both did." "I still am," Boone said. Decker made a small shake of his head. He was a man of considerable intellect, but little of it showed on his tightly packed features, except perhaps in his eyes, which at the moment were not watching the patient, but were fixed on the table between them. "You've started to talk in your sessions," Decker said, "about crimes you think you've committed. Do you remember any of that?" "You know I don't. The trances Decker put him in were too profound. I only remember when you play the tape back." "I won't be playing any of these," Decker said. "I erased them." "Why?" "Because I'm afraid, Boone. For you." He paused. "Maybe for both of us." The crack in the rock was opening, and there was nothing Decker could do to conceal it. "What are these crimes?" Boone asked, his words tentative. "Murders. You talk about them obsessively. At first I thought they were dream crimes. You always had a violent streak in you. And now? Now I'm afraid you might actually have committed them." There was a long silence while Boone studied Decker, more in puzzlement than anger. The blinds had not been pulled all the way down. A slice of sunlight fell across him and onto the table between them. On the glass surface was a bottle of still water, 2 tumblers, and a large envelope. Decker leaned forward and picked it up. "What I'm doing now is probably a crime in itself," he told Boone. "Patient confidentiality is one thing. Protecting a killer is another. Part of me is still hoping to God it isn't true. I want to believe I've succeeded. We've succeeded. Together. I want to believe you're well." "I am well." In lieu of reply, Decker tore open the envelope. "I'd like you to look at these for me," he said, sliding his hand inside and bringing out a sheaf of photographs to meet the light. "I warn you, they're not pleasant." He laid them on his reflection, turned for Boone's perusal. His warning had been well advised. The picture on the top of the pile was like a physical assault. Faced with it, a fear rose in him he'd not felt since being in Decker's care, that the image might possess him. He'd built walls against that superstition, brick by brick, but they shook now and threatened to fall. "It's just a picture." "That's right," Decker replied. "It's just a picture. What do you see?" "A dead man." "A murdered man." "Yes, a murdered man. Not simply murdered, butchered." The life slashed from him in a fury of slices and stabs, his blood flung on the blade that had taken out his neck, taken off his face onto the wall behind him. He wore only his shorts, so the wounds on his body could be easily counted despite the blood. Boone did that just now, to keep the horror from overcoming him. Even here, in this room where the doctor had chiseled another self from the block of his patient's condition, Boone had never choked on terror as he choked now. He tasted his breakfast in the back of his throat, or the meal the night before, rising from his bowels against nature. Shit in his mouth like the dirt of his deed. Count the wounds, he told himself. Pretend they're beads on an abacus. 3, 4, 5 in the abdomen and chest, one in particular, ragged, more like a tear than a wound, gaping so wide the man's innards poked out. On the shoulder, 2 more, and then the face, unmade with cuts. So many their numbers could not be calculated, even by the most detached of observers. They left the victim beyond recognition. Eyes dug out, lips slit off, nose in ribbons. Enough, Decker said, as if the question needed asking. Yes, there's a lot more to see. And I'm going to leave it there, because there is a lot more to see and a lot more to experience from Barker. And if you haven't read Kabar, I highly recommend it. So thank you for listening to my book talk, and I hope you enjoyed it.
Oh, hello. I'm Ellen. I am an editor, designer, and writer with DeadHeadReviews, and happy Pride. I'm going to be doing a book talk from a sci-fi dystopian book called An Unkindness of Ghosts. This is by Rivers Solomon. Aster removed 2 scalpels from her medkit to soak in a solution of disinfectant. Her fingers trembled from the cold, and the tool slipped from her grasp, plopping ungracefully into the sanitizer. In 10 minutes' time, she'd be amputating a child's gangrenous foot. This shaking and carrying on would not do. Was this winter? Dim light, chemiluminescent reactions of peroxide, orange dye, and ester suffused the makeshift operating room. Star jars, the tea-deckers called their improvised lanterns. Aster wondered where they'd gotten the peroxide to work with them, let alone the phenyloxylate ester. All you got to do is give one of them a shake, and the stuff inside gets all mixed up, said Flick, rotted foot propped atop 2 stacked trunks. Look! You looking? Of course Aster was looking. Couldn't Flick see her eyes? A pile of faded comics lay next to the child on a flipped-over wicker basket. The Reign of the Night Empress, number 19, on top. Its cover depicted a woman named Mariam Santi in a beige trench coat carrying a cylindrical device made of metal and wood. When she pulled its tiny lever with her index finger, a silver ball shot out of the tube, wounding her enemy. Rifle, Aster whispered, her lips splitting at the corners where the cold had pasted them shut. As a child, she'd called them ripples, for the way they had of changing everything in a story, and because she'd misread the word the first time around, finding that F's and P's looked similar to her untrained eyes. And that has been a short reading from An Unkindness of Ghosts by Rivers Solomon. Thanks for tuning in to all of our Pride Talks this video. We have a lot of stuff going on for Pride and Horror Month, so you can check us out on Instagram, at ReviewsHead, on Twitter, at ReviewsHead, and here on YouTube. We have a couple of other videos previous to this one, and we will be hosting content all month long on DeadHeadReviews.com, featuring own voices, short stories, essays, articles, and reviews, highlighting members of the LGBTQ community. And if you like what you see, give us a shout, let us know, and remember to like and subscribe. And now I will turn it over to our special guest presentation to round out our book talk video. Thanks for watching, thanks for supporting, and follow us on any of our social media. Thanks. Happy Pride.
Hello, I'm King Kong, and I'm here today to read a passage from my favorite book, Frankenstein. I perceived in the gloom a figure which was taller behind a clump of trees on me. As was fixed, gazing intently to contemplate my feeling. The rest shining, illuminated the object and discovered its shape plainly to me. The gigantic stature and deformity of its shape plainly. There is hideous in the arms of vanity. Handsomely informed me it was the rich, the filthy demon, through whom I live in life. What did he know? Could he be? I started as a concern. The murderer of my brother? No sooner did the idea cross my imagination than I became convinced of the truth. My teeth chattered, and I was forced to lean against a tree for support. The figure passed me quickly, and I lost it in the gloom. Nothing in human shape could have destroyed that fair child. He was a murderer. I could not doubt it. The mere presence of the idea was never rid of a brother fact. I thought of pursuing the devil, but it would have been in vain, for not a flash discovered him to be hanging on a rock on a nearly perpendicular ascent of Mount Air. A hill that bears place on this house. It soon reached the summit and disappeared.